So how are the products and services that you all deliver different, if at all, from what's being offered out there from more conventional or mainstream banks? And maybe Elizabeth, if I could start with you, and again, because you're coming from an infrastructure provider, a service provider, software and services provider standpoint.
Sure. I think probably the biggest difference in us is that we are literally physically there for these bank employees to call if they're needed. We don't use voicemail. So our service level, we believe, is much higher than my competitors. And, a good example is one of our banks, I actually sit in on the weekly management meetings because that's important for me to understand the strategy of the banks, to know what they're struggling with, what their communities are struggling with, so we can position SCI to be more readily available if and when they need to do an acquisition or a new product, that type of thing. And then I think new products and innovation is probably the third place where we're a little bit different. Most core providers, a bank calls up, makes a request. If enough banks vote on it, they'll build it. We don't do it that way. If our banks are struggling with an issue or need something specialized for a certain segment of their population that they're trying to serve, we will have strategic meetings around that and have built very custom products for the banks that hit at certain segments that they need to target.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And what you're doing is unique and it is different. And I know, at least in your case, you have an orientation towards breaking what is somewhat of a hold that the larger providers, the FISs of the world and the Fiservs of the world have on some of the smaller banks. I mean, there's thousands of banks in the United States, as the audience knows, but the preponderance of them rely on the large service providers, Jack Henry and those two I mentioned, chief among them. And sometimes it's difficult, for a more of a regional or a community bank to kind of get the attention on the innovation or on the new product development. And so the idea that you actually are talking weekly, I'm sure you're talking daily, but in there weekly with the teams and being able to, address issues that come up is really pretty exceptional for a CEO of a service provision company.
Hey, Dan, can I chime in there? Because I'm that person she's talking about. We're the bank they're talking about.
Great, please.
Just let me say that Elizabeth is right. It is transformational, really, for us in the relationship that we have with our core provider. And Elizabeth, I meet weekly with my leadership team, and we've adopted Gino Wickman's EOS or traction model. We meet on a weekly basis for an hour and a half, and she's at every meeting. And so as ideas and things come about that we're thinking about, the innovations come about, she's there to help us. And there have just been countless times when we've had an idea and she went immediately to work on it.
Are there any particular challenges or learnings that you've come across in leading impact, values-based, value-oriented organizations? And maybe I can start with you, Elizabeth.
Sure. I think probably the biggest learning I've had, and it speaks to what Darren said about leadership, is really, we deal with people's money, and I'm uniquely aware of the decisions that I make every day as the leader of a company that deals with people's money, especially in communities that we serve. And the decisions I make could impact their daily life, their businesses, their families, their livelihoods. And that is a learning that I've come to know very well. And I would say the challenge is probably an opportunity in my eyes, which is how can we take all these great banks and work together across the country? And as a software provider, that's really of interest to me, to figure out how to make them all connect without the hardships that they deal with today.